The sun smiled warmly over Ibadan that Saturday morning. It was a perfect day, the kind of day people would remember for a long, long time. At the very heart of the busy city, Christ the Redeemer Church stood tall and proud, its white walls shining bright under the clear blue sky. It wasn't just any church. This was where the rich, the powerful, and the famous came to pray, marry, and bury their loved ones. If you were important, you wanted your wedding to happen here. The whole compound was alive. Colorful flowers lined the entrance. Long white ribbons floated in the soft breeze. Expensive cars drove in one after the other, their engines humming like proud lions. Drivers in crisp uniforms rushed around, opening doors for guests dressed in the finest clothes money could buy. Laughter, music, and the sweet smell of fresh roses filled the air. Inside the church, it was even more beautiful. Golden chandeliers hung from the high ceilings. White and gold curtains framed the wide glass windows, and sunlight poured in. At the front of the church, standing calmly near the pulpit, was Pastor Samuel Adeyemi. He was a tall man, a little round in the middle, with soft, kind eyes and a gentle smile. His black and grey hair showed his age, but his spirit was strong and full of life. Everyone respected Pastor Samuel. He had been serving in Christ the Redeemer for 25 years. He had married hundreds of couples. His voice was calm, wise, and when he spoke, even the proudest people listened. Today, Pastor Samuel wore his best white robe with gold embroidery. He held a small Bible in his hands and watched quietly as guests found their seats. He smiled as he saw familiar faces, politicians, business tycoons, celebrities. But he also noticed some faces he didn't recognize, faces that looked around the church with strange, restless eyes. He made a mental note but said nothing. Today was supposed to be a day of joy. The bride, Kemi Adeyemi, was the shining star of the day. Daughter of one of Ibadan's wealthiest families, Kemi was loved by many. She was known for her kind heart, her beauty, and her simple ways despite her riches. People said she was a true princess, not just by wealth, but by the goodness in her heart. Everyone agreed. Kemi deserved a happy ending. And today she was marrying her childhood friend, a man named Femi Adebayo. Pastor Samuel adjusted his glasses and glanced at the clock. The ceremony would begin soon. He watched as the groom stood at the altar, dressed in a sharp white suit, smiling confidently. He was a handsome young man, tall and dark-skinned, with a charming smile that made many of the guests nod approvingly. But Pastor Samuel, wise from years of experience, noticed something strange. The groom's smile looked a little too tight. His hands kept moving, straightening his tie, smoothing his jacket, tapping his fingers against his thigh. Pastor Samuel had seen enough nervous grooms in his time, but this felt different. It wasn't the sweet nervousness of a man marrying the woman he loved. No, it was something else, something harder to name. Still, Pastor Samuel said nothing. He whispered a short prayer under his breath. Lord, if anything is hidden today, bring it to light. The choir began to sing softly. Guests leaned forward, waiting for the grand moment. Everyone was excited. Cameras flashed. Whispered conversations floated through the air. She looks like a queen, someone said. I heard they met again after many years abroad, another voice added. They're a perfect match, a third person said confidently. But Pastor Samuel's heart grew heavier. He watched as little flower girls in pink dresses scattered petals down the aisle. He watched the groom glance nervously toward the entrance. And then the music changed. A soft, slow, beautiful tune filled the church. Every head turned. There she was. Kemi stood at the entrance, wearing a breathtaking white gown that shimmered like 1,000 stars. A long veil covered her face, but her graceful walk and proud posture left no doubt she was every bit the princess they had all imagined. As she began her slow walk down the aisle, arm linked with her father's, guests rose to their feet. The groom's smile widened, but Pastor Samuel noticed how he shifted on his feet, like a man preparing to run. Again, Pastor Samuel prayed silently. Lord, guide me. If this marriage is not right, Stop it today." As Kemi came closer, the groom reached out his hand. Their fingers brushed. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. And yet, deep inside his spirit, Pastor Samuel felt it, a strange, cold breeze of warning. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But what it was, he could not yet see. Not yet. To everyone watching, this was the perfect love story, a fairy tale come to life. But every story has a beginning, and Kemi's had started many years ago, long before today, long before the white gown and the flashing cameras. Kemi Adeyemi had grown up in a life many could only dream of. Her father was one of the richest men in Ibadan, known for his hotels, real estate, and powerful friends. But even with all the money in the world, Kemi's childhood was not filled with snobbish parties or gold-plated toys. Her parents had raised her simply, teaching her to be kind, humble, and generous. As a little girl, Kemi's favorite memories were not in grand ballrooms or five-star hotels. They were in the dusty gardens of their old family home, running barefoot with her best friend, a boy named Femi Adebayo. Femi's family was not as wealthy as Kemi's, but their friendship had been pure and strong. They spent hours climbing trees, chasing goats, and dreaming about the future. "We'll be best friends forever," Femi had said once, his small hand clutching hers. Kemi had believed him with all her heart, but life had other plans. Femi's family moved abroad when they were still young. His father had gotten a job opportunity in London, and just like that, Femi was gone. No goodbye, no letters, no phone calls, only silence. Kemi had cried for weeks. She had kept a small wooden bracelet Femi had given her, a simple thing, worn and faded, but to her, it was priceless. As the years passed, she buried the memory deep in her heart. She grew into a beautiful young woman, studied business at a prestigious university, and took her place beside her father in the family empire. Suitors came and went, but none touched her heart. Then, one rainy evening, everything changed. Kemi had just returned from a long meeting when her phone buzzed. A message request on Instagram from a name she hadn't heard in years. Femi Adebayo. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Kemi, is it really you? After all these years, I can't believe it. Please say we can meet." At first, she thought it was a joke, maybe a scam. But when they began chatting, sharing old memories only the real Femi would know, her heart started to believe again. He told her how he had lost touch because of the strict life his parents forced on him abroad, how he had searched for her many times but never found her until a mutual friend posted an old picture. Femi apologized again and again for the years lost, and Kemi, with her soft heart, told him it was not his fault, saying she still has the bracelet he once gifted her, too easily. They agreed to meet. The day they saw each other again was like a scene from a movie. It was at a cozy coffee shop tucked away in Ikoyi. Kemi had worn a simple dress, too nervous to even put on makeup. But when Femi walked in tall, handsome, wearing a shy smile, her heart had leapt. He was no longer the skinny boy she remembered. He was a man now, confident, charming, full of sweet words that made her laugh and blush like a schoolgirl. They talked for hours, about childhood memories, about dreams, about how strange and beautiful life could be. It was like time had folded in on itself, bringing them back together exactly where they had left off. From that day, they were inseparable. Dinners turned into long night walks, phone calls turned into weekend trips, laughter turned into shy touches, soft kisses, and whispered promises. And before Kemi could even catch her breath, Femi was down on one knee, asking her to marry him. She said yes, with tears in her eyes, believing with her whole heart that destiny had brought her first love back. Her parents were cautious at first. They asked questions, raised eyebrows, but seeing how happy Kemi was, how full of life she had become again, they agreed. After all, who could stand in the way of true love? The wedding planning began almost immediately. Every detail had to be perfect, nothing but the best for their daughter. And now, here they were, the whole city buzzing with excitement. Christ the Redeemer Church filled with the cream of society, gathered to witness the magical reunion of two childhood sweethearts. Only Pastor Samuel, standing quietly by the altar, felt the faint whisper of unease. He watched the groom carefully. Femi Adebayo. Pastor Samuel's instincts, sharpened by years of guiding souls through love, loss, and lies, told him something was off. The way Femi's eyes darted around, the nervous laugh that seemed too practiced, the way he avoided old unplanned stories when guests tried to tease him about his childhood days with Kemi. Pastor Samuel kept his peace for now. It was not yet time to speak. The crowd sighed with happiness. The ceremony was about to begin. And deep in the quiet places of Pastor Samuel's heart, a storm was slowly beginning to gather. To everyone else in the church, the day was unfolding like a dream. But to Pastor Samuel, it was like watching a beautiful painting slowly cracking at the edges. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, small things. But sometimes the small things tell the biggest truths. It had started 2 weeks before the wedding, during the premarital counseling sessions. It was a tradition at Christ the Redeemer Church that every couple must sit with Pastor Samuel for counseling, a chance to prepare their hearts, not just their outfits, for marriage. Kemi had been glowing, excited, laughing shyly at every question. But Femi had been different. At first, Pastor Samuel had thought it was just nerves. Many young men became shy when speaking of love in front of a pastor. But soon he noticed things that made his heart heavy. One afternoon during counseling, Pastor Samuel asked a simple question. Femi, which festival did you and Kemi used to attend as children in Ibadan? Femi smiled and answered, Of course, sir. We always celebrated the Yam festival together in April. Kemi nodded happily beside him, but Pastor Samuel's heart sank. The Yam festival, the traditional one in Ibadan, was celebrated in August, not April. Every Yoruba child who grew up in Ibadan knew this. April was too early. Only someone who had read about it on the internet or heard about it halfway would make that mistake. Pastor Samuel said nothing. He simply smiled and continued. But in his mind, a small stone had been dropped into a still pond. Ripples of doubt began to spread. Another time, during a light conversation after service, someone had jokingly asked Femi, You remember Mama Titi's stand near your old house? Femi laughed and said, Ah yes, Mama Titi, the one who used to sell roasted yams and plantain at the junction. The group had laughed politely, but Pastor Samuel had caught it again. Everyone who truly grew up in that area knew Mama Titi was famous for her akara, the best bean cakes in town, not yam and plantain. Roasted yam sellers were across the market square, not near the houses. It was another tiny crack, but it was there. And then there were the dodged questions. When asked about his family, Femi would lower his eyes, sigh deeply and say things like, It's too painful to talk about. I lost many family members abroad. I would rather not remember. I am all alone now. At first, people respected his grief. But after the third or fourth time, Pastor Samuel began to feel something was wrong. It wasn't just sadness in Femi's voice, it was avoidance. A man hiding behind a wall, not mourning behind it. Pastor Samuel wished he could dismiss the feeling. But he had seen too many marriages built on lies crumble like sandcastles in the rain. Then came the request that truly troubled him. During the final wedding rehearsal, as they walked through the program, Femi had leaned close to Pastor Samuel and said, Sir, can we make the ceremony shorter? Maybe skip the speak now or forever hold your peace part? He had laughed lightly, brushing it off as nervousness. You know, sometimes people cause unnecessary drama at weddings. We just want a smooth day, no interruptions. Kemi had looked slightly surprised. Wow, Femi, are you hiding a secret fiancé you don't want me to know about? Come on, babe, you know that can never happen, he replied sharply. She didn't say more, she had only asked the question as a joke. She trusted him completely. But Pastor Samuel froze inside. The speak now or forever hold your peace was not just a fancy tradition. It was a powerful spiritual moment, a chance for truth to be spoken if anyone knew a reason why the marriage should not happen. No honest man would fear it. Pastor Samuel gave a small smile and said gently, "Ah, my son, no wedding is without small fears, but truth and love have nothing to hide. We will keep the full program. Trust me, you'll be thankful." Femi had nodded quickly, but Pastor Samuel saw the flicker of frustration in his eyes before he masked it. Another crack. Another whisper in Pastor Samuel's spirit that all was not well. Now, standing at the altar, watching Femi and Kemi together, Pastor Samuel felt the full weight of those tiny cracks pressing down on his heart. Femi held Kemi's hand with just a little too much force. He smiled a little too wide when people looked at him. He scanned the crowd like a man waiting for something or someone to jump out. To the guests, it looked like normal nerves. To Pastor Samuel, it looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, praying nobody noticed the ground crumbling under his feet. He would proceed with the ceremony, but he kept his spirit sharp, his heart open, and his prayers steady. If there was something hidden this day of beauty, God would reveal it. Even if it broke hearts, even if it stopped the wedding. He had learned over the years that when your spirit refuses to rest, it's better to listen. And today, God was surely whispering something. The first real crack came 2 days before the wedding. It was a quiet afternoon. The sun was hot, the sky wide and blue. Pastor Samuel sat alone in his small office at the back of Christ the Redeemer Church, going through final wedding arrangements, when there was a soft knock on his door. "Come in," he called. An old man stepped in, carefully closing the door behind him. He wore a simple brown agbada and walked with the slow carefulness of someone who had seen many years. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and restless. "Good afternoon, sir," the man said, bowing slightly. "Good afternoon, Baba," Pastor Samuel replied warmly, standing to offer him a seat. "Please come in." The old man sat down slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his cap. "My name is Baba Adebayo," he said quietly. I was the uncle of Femi Adebayo." The word struck Pastor Samuel like a cold wind. "You are Femi's uncle?" he asked gently, though he kept his face calm. "Yes, Pastor," Baba said. "But that man marrying tomorrow, the one they call Femi, something is not right." Pastor Samuel leaned forward slightly, his heart beating faster. "What do you mean, Baba?" Baba's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "I saw the wedding announcement. I saw his picture, and my heart grew cold. That is not my nephew, Pastor." The room seemed to shrink around them. "But are you sure? Maybe he has changed over the years?" Pastor Samuel asked carefully. Baba shook his head firmly. "I know my blood. I know Femi. That man looks like him, talks almost like him. But he is not him. Femi would never hide from his family. Never. And there are things, small things, that only family can see." Pastor Samuel sat back slowly, the full weight of Baba's words settling on him like a heavy cloak. It was one thing to feel uneasy. It was another thing entirely to have a blood relative raise the alarm. The elder man leaned closer, lowering his voice even more. "Femi's parents are late, and I really haven't seen him for a long time, but something just doesn't seem right. I think there is a way you can know for sure, Pastor. Femi had a birthmark, shaped like a star behind his right ear, from birth. If that man does not have it, he is lying." Silence filled the room. Pastor Samuel nodded slowly, a troubled look clouding his face. "Thank you, Baba," he said finally. "I will be watchful." Baba stood up, adjusting his cap. "I have said my piece. The rest is in your hands, Pastor." Without another word, the old man left, moving quietly like a shadow fading into the afternoon sun. Pastor Samuel sat still for a long time after the door closed. His hands rested on the Bible on his desk, but his mind was far away. He prayed silently, asking for wisdom. What was really happening here? Could it be true? That evening, Pastor Samuel decided to act carefully. During the final private meeting with the couple, before the church closed its doors for the night, he smiled warmly at them and said, "Tell me again how you both reconnected. It's such a beautiful story." Kemi beamed, her eyes sparkling with love. "Femi found me online, Pastor, through a friend who posted an old school picture. He said he recognized me immediately." Pastor Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "And your memories, Femi? Tell me, what was your favorite place to play when you were small here in Ibadan?" Femi chuckled nervously. "Ah, Pastor, it's been so long. You know how memory is. But I think, yes, we always played at the big fountain, in Bodija." Kemi laughed lightly beside him. "Yes, Pastor, the Bodija fountain." Pastor Samuel smiled gently, but inside he frowned. There was no famous fountain in Bodija during their childhood days. Bodija was known for its large market and quiet residential estates, not any public fountains. Again, a small mistake. But before he could press further, Kemi placed her hand protectively on Femi's arm and said, "Pastor, please, those childhood memories are so far away now. What matters is our future together." Her voice was soft, but firm. Pastor Samuel noticed the way Femi's shoulders relaxed immediately after she spoke, almost as if he had been holding his breath. The pastor nodded, still smiling warmly, but his heart ached. Kemi's love for Femi was deep and blind. She didn't see the small wrong turns. She didn't notice the moments of hesitation, the strange answers, the quiet panic in his eyes. She had already decided to believe. And now she was protecting him without even realizing it. That night, after locking the church doors and blessing the empty halls with prayer, Pastor Samuel stood alone under the cold stars. He looked up into the vast dark sky and whispered, "Father, you see what we cannot see. If this wedding is built on lies, tear down the mask. Reveal the truth, no matter how painful." The wind carried his words away into the night. And somewhere, in the heavy silence of the city, trouble stirred, waiting for the right moment to come crashing into the light. Outside the church, a long line of expensive cars stretched around the street, sleek black SUVs, shining Benzes, and even a few Rolls-Royces. Men in smart suits and women in flowing aso-ebi fabrics of gold and teal streamed through the gates, their laughter filling the air. Inside the church, the pews were packed. Politicians sat side by side with celebrities. Top business owners, traditional rulers, and old family friends filled the front rows, fanning themselves gently and whispering excitedly about the couple. "This is the wedding of the year," someone said with a proud smile. "I heard even the governor is attending," another whispered. The atmosphere was electric. It buzzed with music, money, and the smell of expensive perfumes. At the center of it all, at the very end of the long aisle, stood Pastor Samuel Adeyemi. He held his Bible tightly, a calm figure in the middle of all the excitement. But inside, his spirit was far from calm. His eyes watched everything. His heart listened to the silent spaces between the laughter. And again, that quiet voice in his spirit warned him, "Be ready." Kemi was glowing. She was full of trust, full of hope, full of dreams. She had no idea about the storm quietly gathering above her head. She had no idea that the man waiting at the altar might not be who he claimed to be. Pastor Samuel prayed quietly before he opened his mouth. He prayed for strength, for clarity, for courage, because he knew that today was not just about vows and rings. Today was a battlefield between truth and deception. He led the couple through the prayers, the hymns, the blessings. The crowd watched with shining eyes. Many dabbed their faces with handkerchiefs. Some snapped pictures quietly with their phones. Everything seemed perfect. Finally, Pastor Samuel reached the part of the ceremony that Femi had once tried to remove. The part Femi had feared. Pastor Samuel's voice rang out, clear and strong. "If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Silence fell over the church like a heavy blanket. It lasted a second. 2 seconds. 3. People smiled. Some giggled softly, already preparing to celebrate. and then a chair scraped loudly against the tiled floor. Heads turned sharply. From the third row, a figure stood up. It was Baba Adebayo. Kemi's smile faltered. Femi's hands tightened around Kemi's fingers, not in love, but in fear. Baba, old but strong in spirit, pointed a trembling finger toward the groom and said loudly, his voice shaking with pain and anger, "That man is not my nephew." The church gasped. A low murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. Kemi turned sharply to look at Femi, confusion and fear in her wide eyes. Femi's face turned pale, the color draining from his cheeks. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Pastor Samuel took a deep, steady breath. The moment he had prayed for, the moment he had feared, had come. The mask was cracking, and the truth, whatever it was about to break free. The church was no longer quiet. After Baba's loud accusation, the atmosphere cracked open like a broken drum. Murmurs rose everywhere, sharp whispers, gasps, confused looks. Kemi stood frozen, staring at Femi. Her hand trembled in his. She tried to pull away gently, but he held on too tightly. Pastor Samuel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Brother Femi," he said, looking straight into the young man's eyes, "you have heard the accusation. For the peace of all gathered here today, please speak." Femi swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. Then he shook his head quickly and forced a small, shaky laugh. "Pastor, please, I don't know what's happening. Maybe Baba is confused. It's been years since he saw me. People change." He turned to the guests, trying to smile. "I'm Femi Adebayo, Kemi's childhood friend. Please, let's not ruin this beautiful day with confusion." The murmurs grew louder. Some people nodded uncertainly. Others frowned, exchanging worried glances. Kemi looked at him, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but didn't know what to say. Pastor Samuel raised his hand gently, and the crowd slowly quieted down. He looked at Femi with steady, wise eyes and said, "Brother Femi, if there is no cause for doubt, then this will be simple. The elder mentioned a birthmark, a star-shaped birthmark behind your right ear. Will you please show it to us?" The whole church seemed to lean forward at once. Femi froze. For one long second he stood there, stiff as a statue. Then, very slowly, he raised his hand to the back of his ear and paused. His fingers hovered there, unsure. "Pastor," he said, forcing another shaky laugh, I had surgery years ago. I removed the birthmark. It was ugly. I didn't like it." There was another sharp murmur from the crowd. Someone whispered loudly, "Who removes a birthmark from behind the ear?" Another voice, more skeptical, "Lies." Pastor Samuel remained calm. He took a few slow steps closer to Femi. "Brother Femi," he said softly, "you say you removed it, but surely there would still be a scar, something. Let us see, let everyone have peace today." Femi shook his head again, more desperately now. "Please, Pastor, let's not make a scene. I respect you, but this is not necessary. Kemi knows me. She believes in me." He looked at Kemi, his eyes pleading. Kemi looked torn, her heart fighting her head. She opened her mouth to speak, but Pastor Samuel raised his hand again. "Let us see," the pastor said, his voice carrying the full authority of a man who had walked with God for decades. There was no escape. Slowly, Femi turned his head and pulled his ear forward. Gasps filled the church. There was nothing there. No birthmark, no scar, nothing. Just smooth, untouched skin. The air grew heavy, thick with shock. Pastor Samuel's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "My son, you see now why questions arise. Please, speak the truth. God is still merciful." Femi's shoulders sagged. The strength seemed to drain out of him. He licked his dry lips, struggling to find words. Finally, after a long, painful silence, he said, I am not Femi. I did know the real Femi. We met at university abroad. He was like a brother to me." The gasps around the church were loud. Some women covered their mouths. An elder man shook his head slowly. Someone near the back whispered, "Blood of Jesus." Femi continued, his voice low and trembling. We were close. Best friends, almost like family. When Femi got sick, before he passed, he made me promise. Tears welled up in his eyes. He made me promise to take care of the people he loved. He told me to live for him, to be his family since he had no one left. He had recently connected with Kemi and didn't want to hurt her. Some people in the crowd frowned, confused. Others shook their heads slowly, not buying the story. Pastor Samuel's eyes stayed sharp, kind but unrelenting. You are saying, the pastor asked quietly, that your friend, before dying, asked you to pretend to be him? Femi nodded quickly. Yes, Pastor. Out of love, out of loyalty. I didn't mean harm, I just wanted to keep his memory alive, to be the man he would have been. I loved him like a brother. He looked around the church, eyes wild with desperation. He loves Kemi, he cried. I didn't plan this to hurt anyone. I was honoring my friend's dying wish, and along the way, I fell in love with Kemi too. For a moment, the church was silent again. A few soft sobs could be heard. It was a sad story. A story that could pull at the heart. But Pastor Samuel, wise beyond his years, did not move. He looked at Femi carefully. And then he asked, If you were truly so close, my son, why are your memories so vague? Especially memories with Kemi. I think if your friend wanted you to be him, he will fill you in on the basics at least. Femi opened his mouth and closed it again. His eyes darted around, searching for an answer that wouldn't come. The cracks were now too wide. The story was breaking apart in the open air. Pastor Samuel's voice was soft but strong. You see, my son, the truth is simple. It does not stumble. It does not hide. Kemi stood trembling, her hands clenched together. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the man she had trusted, the man she had almost married. And for the first time, deep in her heart, a small voice whispered to her, This is not the boy you once loved. The painting was falling apart. The mask was slipping, and the full, ugly truth was about to come out. The church was drowning in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the candles seemed to burn slower, as if the air had thickened around them. Femi, or the man who called himself Femi, stood trembling at the altar. Kemi's tears had already started falling, silent rivers down her cheeks. Pastor Samuel remained steady, standing between truth and lies, refusing to look away. Finally, under the heavy weight of watching eyes and the sharp pain of his own shame, the man broke. He lowered his head, and when he lifted it again, the charming mask was gone. In its place was a tired, beaten face, a face carrying years of lies and loneliness. The man straightened his back, swallowing hard, and said louder, My real name is Chinedu Nwosu. The name hung in the air like a slap. Chinedu, an Igbo man, a stranger to the world of Kemi Adeyemi and the great Adeyemi family. Pastor Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. Tell us everything, Chinedu. All of it. Chinedu closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the words spilled out like a flood. I was Femi's roommate abroad, he began. We met at university. I was there on a scholarship, a poor boy from a broken village. I had nothing. No parents, no home, just a dream and hard work. The crowd listened, shocked. Femi was everything I wasn't, Chinedu continued bitterly. He had money, connections, a future already waiting for him. Chinedu's voice cracked with the weight of old memories. When Femi lost his parents in a car accident, he changed. He became lonely, broken. That's when he started talking about reconnecting with Kemi, the girl he had loved since childhood. Pastor Samuel nodded slowly, urging him to go on. He would show me her pictures, Chinedu said. He talked about her like she was light in a dark world. He planned to find her, to build a life with her. A few people wiped their eyes quietly at the story. And then, Chinedu's voice grew hoarse. Femi got into an accident. The church held its breath. Chinedu paused, fighting tears of his own. I held his hand when he died. It was a horrible car accident. The sadness in his voice was not real. And Pastor Samuel knew sadness does not wash away betrayal. And Chinedu's betrayal was still waiting to be confessed. Chinedu's hands shook slightly as he continued. After Femi's death, I was lost. I had no papers, no money, no home. I was drowning. He looked up, eyes full of desperate honesty. Then I remembered Kemi. I remembered the rich, beautiful girl he loved, the one he never got to meet again. Kemi flinched at his words, like he had slapped her. I found his old messages, his pictures, his memories of her, and I made a choice. The crowd leaned in, hearts pounding. I used social media. I used old contacts. I built myself into Femi Adebayo. Chinedu's voice hardened, the truth spilling out at last. I made myself into the man Kemi would love. I came back to Nigeria. I found her. I used everything I knew, everything I saw from their chats to win her heart. Kemi's knees buckled slightly. Her father rushed forward to steady her, but she shook her head stubbornly, standing tall in her pain. Pastor Samuel's voice was low but powerful. Why? Chinedu laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that bounced off the church walls. Money, power, freedom. He threw his hands out helplessly. I was tired of being the poor boy who slept on the floor. Tired of begging, struggling, living hand to mouth. This was my chance. He pointed towards Kemi's family seated in the front rows. Marry her, inherit the trust fund, step into a life of comfort and respect. No more debts, no more empty pockets, no more shame. His voice broke with anger and regret. I deserve, after all the suffering, after all the loneliness. The church was silent again. Not because they understood, but because they were too stunned to speak. Pastor Samuel stepped closer, his voice trembling with holy sadness. And what about love, my son? What about Kemi's heart? What about her dreams? Chinedu's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked truly ashamed. I tried to love her, he whispered. But then I reminded myself I don't have time for love. I knew what I wanted, and I had to stay focused. He dropped to his knees right there at the altar. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking into sobs. I'm sorry. But the damage was done. The fairy tale was shattered. The dream was over, and now only the pieces remained. For a long moment after Chinedu's confession, no one in the church moved. It was like the whole world had frozen. Kemi stood still at the altar, her veil pushed back, her face pale and broken. The beautiful dreams she had held onto so tightly had fallen apart right before her eyes. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She stood strong, like a tree battered by the storm, refusing to fall. Chinedu remained kneeling, his sobs filling the church, but no one moved to comfort him. He had chosen this path, and now he would walk it alone. Suddenly, as if a switch flipped inside him, Chinedu rose to his feet and turned sharply toward the side door. He bolted. He ran down the aisle, past the shocked guests, knocking over a flower stand in his rush. Gasps and cries filled the church again. Stop him! Someone shouted. But before Chinedu could even reach the door, two tall men in dark suits stepped forward swiftly. They grabbed him firmly by the arms. Chinedu struggled for a second, wild with fear, but he was no match for them. They twisted his arms gently but firmly behind his back, leading him out of the church. The crowd parted silently to let them pass. Chinedu's head hung low, shame covering him like a dark cloud. Kemi's father, Chief Adeyemi, watched it all unfold with tight, sad eyes. He stepped up to Pastor Samuel and whispered, Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for preparing us. Pastor Samuel only nodded, his face full of deep sorrow. The night before the wedding, Pastor Samuel had quietly met with Chief Adeyemi. He had laid out all his quiet observations. He had not wanted to cause panic. But he had insisted, For your daughter's safety, sir, let there be security on standby, just in case. Chief Adeyemi, a wise man despite his pride, had listened. And now that simple act of preparation had saved them from greater shame and deeper disaster. The wedding guests slowly began to leave, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads sadly. Some hugged Kemi gently before leaving. Some wept openly. Nobody blamed her. They blamed the wickedness of deceit. the cruelty of a man who had twisted love into a weapon. In the days that followed, the news spread across Ibadan like wildfire. Heiress saved from fake groom at the altar. Pastor Samuel exposes impostor during grand wedding. Kemi Adeyemi's heartbreak sparks national conversation on trust and identity. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But behind the flashing headlines and noisy gossip, a young woman sat quietly in her family home trying to heal. Kemi did not hide. She did not run away to London or New York, though she could have. She stayed. She grieved openly. She allowed herself to cry, to break, to be angry. But she did not let bitterness destroy her. Slowly, day by day, she picked up the shattered pieces of her heart. With the support of her family, her true friends, and a community that loved her even more now for her strength, Kemi found a new purpose. 3 months after the wedding disaster, Kemi held her first public event, a seminar on women's rights and fraud awareness. She stood on the small stage, her voice steady and clear. "I trusted blindly," she said. "I ignored the small signs because I wanted to believe in love. Today I know better, and I will use my story to help others see, to help others fight for their dignity and protect their dreams." The hall erupted in applause. And somewhere at the back, Pastor Samuel smiled quietly, proud of the young woman who refused to be defeated. Life moved on. The seasons changed. Christ the Redeemer Church continued to stand tall, a little wiser, a little more watchful. Pastor Samuel's sermons carried a deeper fire now, a reminder that love must be built on truth, not fantasy. And Kemi? She shone brighter than ever, not because of money, not because of fame, but because she had walked through fire and come out gold. The heartbreak had not destroyed her. It had only refined her. And though her heart still carried scars, it also carried new strength, the kind of strength that can only be found on the other side of broken dreams. 6 months later, the city of Ibadan was back to its usual rhythm: busy streets, noisy markets, and warm, dusty sunsets. But for Christ the Redeemer Church, something had quietly changed. Since that unforgettable wedding day, Pastor Samuel Adeyemi had become more than just a pastor. He had become a symbol, a reminder that wisdom and courage could still stand against deceit. People came from far and near to hear him preach now. And every Sunday the church overflowed with new faces, all eager to hear the man who had dared to stop a wedding, who had dared to protect a daughter of the land. One particular Sunday, the church was packed. Pastor Samuel stood at the pulpit, his Bible open, his voice calm and strong. He spoke not with anger, but with deep kindness, the kind that touches hearts. "People of God," he began, his voice carrying through the hall, "discernment is a gift. Blind trust is a danger." He paused, looking into the sea of faces. "Love is beautiful, but love must not be blind. Hope is powerful, but hope must walk hand in hand with wisdom." The congregation nodded slowly, listening carefully. "If you feel uneasy," Pastor Samuel continued, "if something deep inside whispers that something is wrong, listen, pray, watch, wait." He closed his Bible gently. God does not rush. Divine timing is never hurried. He reveals what must be revealed when it must be revealed. A soft amen rolled through the crowd, and many, especially the young women, held his words close to their hearts. Pastor Samuel smiled warmly. He had no bitterness toward Chinedu, only sadness. But he was glad, deeply glad, that the truth had been revealed before it was too late. As for Kemi Adeyemi, life was slowly weaving itself into something new. The pain had not disappeared overnight, but healing had started, quiet, patient, steady. Kemi threw herself into her new foundation, the Light Foundation, an organization helping young women avoid fraud and fight for their rights. Her days were full now of workshops, seminars, visits to schools, and endless smiles of gratitude from the girls she inspired. She had turned her heartbreak into a lighthouse for others. But deep down, a small part of her still wondered, would I ever find real love? Not a love built on money, not a love built on lies, but a love built on truth and fate as it often does, answered when she least expected. It was a quiet afternoon. Kemi had gone to a local hospital to donate educational materials. She wasn't wearing designer clothes that day, just a simple white blouse, jeans, and sandals. No makeup, no jewelry, just herself. She was helping the hospital staff carry books when she stumbled slightly, dropping a heavy box. "Let me help you," a gentle voice said. She looked up. A young man in simple clothes, a hospital volunteer uniform, bent down to pick up the box. His hands were rough with work, but his smile was soft, genuine. "Thank you," Kemi said, a little breathless. The man smiled again, lifting the box easily. "I'm Daniel," he said simply. "I work here part-time. What's your name?" No mention of fame. No glance at her face in recognition. No awkward stares about her past. Just kindness. Just patience. For the first time in a long time, Kemi's heart skipped, not in fear, not in confusion, but in quiet hope. They talked for a few minutes about books, children, and dreams. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't lightning. It was something better. It was peace. Pastor Samuel would later smile knowingly when Kemi told him about Daniel. "You see," he said, "real love does not shout, it does not pretend, it does not come wrapped in gold. It comes in truth, in kindness, in patience." And Kemi, wiser now, stronger now, knew he was right. She had walked through the fire. She had cried through the storm. And now, finally, she was stepping into the gentle sunrise of a brand new day. Not as the broken heiress who was fooled at the altar, but as the woman who chose to rise again, stronger, braver, and ready for a love that was real.